What is up, everybody? It is the Oracle at Mushin here, bringing you a weekly tarot card reading. Just to throw this out there, this is for the general collective or collective consciousness. If you want a more precise reading, you can book one. There'll be a link in the description. So, diving right into it, we have ebb and flow. This card really speaks to the concept of understanding natural cycles. Things are going to come, they're going to wax and wane. I would say that this coming up in this week, it's going to be having the awareness of the things that you value, or some of the things that you really appreciate. They're not always going to be there, so don't take them for granted. Really to strive to find the value in these things while they are present. And then the other element of that as well is understanding that some of the difficulties that you're facing at this current time aren't always going to be there as well. View it somewhat like weather. The weather isn't always sunny, it isn't always rainy, it's always shifting. And just be mindful of it. The next concept of this card really is this kind of so the bottom half of this woman is kind of mermaid-esque, and that is speaking kind of about water. Water in tarot or in esoteric stuff is relative to emotions. So this is kind of the when you understand the concept of ebb and flow, you're able to navigate your emotions a lot more. What's the word I'm looking for? A lot more suitably, I guess, maybe, or without being so attached to them. And that can create a lot of space for you to have a better experience. The next element of this that really comes up is kind of this woman half of her. So that's also being able to allow yourself to feel your emotions, but also to navigate them well. And then you tap into the very top part, which is kind of like these horns, which is this more animal consciousness. So sometimes we think that animals are primitive because they don't have the ability to maybe reason like we do, or some things like that. First off, I'm pretty confident in the fact that animals have consciousness and think, but I would also say that animals maybe aren't worried down with so much anxiety and some of the shortcomings that we have as humans, specifically because they don't have some of the quote-unquote gifts that we have. This is something that we have to refine, and becoming attached to the ebb and flow mentality of it is something that can help you tap into the more pure essence of animal instinct. And finally, the thing that's really expressed in this is the dark moon or new moon and the full moon. And that's just showing that everything is cyclical in life, and understanding that things can't remain as they always are. There is a saying by Heraclitus, and to paraphrase it, it's the only constant is change. And then when you look at the colors of the card, you have purple, which is connection to spirit. You have blue, which is third eye, which is kind of developing your intuition. There's these white elements in there. White is kind of the purity of this moment. And then there's this circle behind her too, which kind of blends all of these colors. And when you tap into ebb and flow and you stop resisting, start to surrender to reality and spirituality on a deeper level, you kind of tap into a more pure essence, which allows you to tap into your intuition on a deeper level. And it also frees you up to connect to spirit on a deeper level. So coming up this week is going to be a good opportunity for you to explore that. So getting into the first card, and there's no specific questions. We're just going to see what comes up. So we have the Six of Bones. Six of Bones in traditional tarot, it would be Six of Wands. Wands are about fire. Fire is about creativity. The card is actually in a reversal in this one. So tying it into ebb and flow, your inability to kind of want to go with the flow of life is directly creating these circumstances where you feel less than, where you're selling yourself short, where you don't feel valued, or where you don't have this level of pride, because on the card there is a lion. It is a shaman with a lion looking over it, but the shaman looking the lion in the eyes from his lower vantage point, and in my perception presenting himself as equal. As again, because it's in the reversal, this is kind of saying you're selling yourself short and not seeing yourself as valuable as you are. And you really need to tap into the deeper experience here. And the colors that come up in this card are yellow, which is navel chakra. So because the card's reversed, kind of you're not seeing yourself on a deep level. And then there's this orange in there, which is about sacral chakra. Oftentimes it's tied to sexual energy, but it's also about creativity. So to me, this indicates you're kind of creating this upside down space within the card for yourself by your own attitude and actions, and kind of resisting the ebb and flow. And then finally there's the red. Red is relative to root chakra, which is kind of connection to the material world and being grounded, and it's destabilizing you. Because of your lack of sense of self, you're creating this destabilizing situation. In order to kind of counteract this and flip it up to the right side, get it out of the reversal, it is tapping into the ebb and flow. It's understanding that it's not always going to be like this. You need to cut yourself a break as regards to how you see yourself. Obviously, I can't say that going out and having sex is going to be a good or bad thing, because there can be different choices that can, based upon how you go about it, can create different energetic repercussions. But I would say using creativity more so than the sexual energy of the sacral chakra, and writing, painting, playing music, just singing a song will help you. And then as far as the red, the material aspect of the card, just take some small movements towards what you want in life, and that will kind of help you get a better sense of self and feel more worthy. So moving on to the next card, we have the King of Stones in the reverse position as well. So King of Stones is somebody who is able to navigate through their emotions in a comfortable and mindful way. Stones in traditional tarot is relative to cups. Cups is relative to water. And again, water is relative to emotion. And overall, this is kind of saying you're having this difficult emotional time right now, or you may be going through it. And one of the best ways to understand that, yet again, is looking at it through the lens of ebb and flow, is to understand that you're not always going to feel this way, even though you might have always felt this way. Sometimes we stay stuck in these emotional patterns because we reinforce it with our belief structure that it is always this way, and we won't surrender to the fact that this is temporary. And in regards to the previous card, we're actively creating these circumstances ourselves. So when you're in this victim mindset, the more you actively engage in victim thinking, the more you create these circumstances in your life, because you're victimizing yourself. And I'm not going to say that good things don't ever happen, or bad things don't ever happen to good people, because they do. But how we carry that charge moving forward and how we process it will have a direct impact on the quality of life we have after the fact. So the other element of this card that is upside down, there's this tortoise. So to me, the tortoise is out, and his head is out. In the reversal, you're kind of in this fear space, kind of constricting yourself and not allowing yourself to shine at your brightest, which is also echoed in this card. There's a lot going on. The general premise is you're disconnected from source. You're not tapping into your true communication about what's going on. And that could even be so much as you're not having an honest discussion with yourself. You're kind of in denial about some things. And then there's this darker blue, which is kind of third eye, which is intuition, and you're kind of ignoring your own intuition. Oftentimes people do this in regards to romantic relationships. They ignore all these red flags and assume it's going to be different based upon nothing. I'm guilty of this myself at times. And one of the other elements of this tortoise is tapping back into the tortoise. Reptiles are symbols of wisdom. So if the tortoise is constricted because it's in the reverse position, it means you're kind of ignoring your own wisdom and not delving into your emotions, which is cutting you off from spirit, cutting you off from your intuition, reducing your ability to communicate purely. And in order to kind of navigate through this, when you tap into ebb and flow and say, this is just where I'm at now, it's not always this way, things don't always go this bad for me, this is just a rough time, you begin to tap into the wisdom. You begin to come out of your shell, so you're no longer in fear. The more you tap into that wisdom, the more you open up your intuition. The more you open up your intuition, the more you're able to see, come out of your shell more, because you can understand that maybe this is happening for a reason. The more you kind of begin to apply on live on faith more and kind of step out on this Indiana Jones invisible bridge, the more you tap into connecting with spirit. And to tie into the communication piece of this, like the throat chakra piece that's represented by this person's necklace, the more you communicate from your heart, because the necklace is hanging over his heart, the more honest of an experience you're going to have. The more honest of an experience you're going to have, the more kind of purity you'll get in your life, the easier your emotions will be able to navigate. And then there's this other element here too. There's these two branches off of this communication. And to me, this kind of speaks more of finding alternative ways to communicate. So part of that would be communicating with other people. And then part of that would be communicating with yourself, which I would tie into the creativity in the Six of Bones, the previous card. So you have a couple things to work through sense of self and really being in touch with your emotions. But even that ties into the ebb and flow. Just be kind to yourself this upcoming week. The next thing that comes up is strength. So this card, this interpretation of strength is kind of an unpleasant one. It is a bear smashing this medicine wheel. And I think that that's one of the really important things to consider with this ebb and flow, with these ebb and flow cards, is really not trying to force all of this ebb and flow so much as letting it flow. So here's one of the things that I found in my own life, and maybe it'll be true to you as well. Many times when I try to correct some behaviors that are displeasing or that I've gained awareness of, I really go to the opposite end of the spectrum, and in doing so it kind of sends me more out of balance and almost perpetuates the extremeness of the ebb and flow. Now that I've kind of learned to not engage so much in correcting it but letting it soothe itself out, it doesn't have all this inertia or force to it. Consider one of those perpetual motion machines. Well, I understand that the concept is to perpetually keep them in motion. One of the other elements of that too is if it swings back one side, or I guess consider a pendulum. Maybe this is a better example. But if you have a pendulum swinging from left to right and you don't continually add any more energy to it, the swings are going to get less and less and less till it finds a center point, right? This is what this kind of speaks of to me. You don't have to force all of this change. You just have to let the ebb and flow take itself until it kind of reaches a more natural state. So the big fix in all of this isn't so much doing, although I've mentioned some suggestions on how to kind of recalibrate yourself. There is some doing involved, but the doing is not doing it so forcefully to where you send yourself out of balance. I hope that makes sense. One of the aspects of this card that really speaks to me too is the kind of the dirty yellow in it of this full moon. So yellow again is sense of self, and the dirty yellow is kind of this disturbed sense of self where you feel that you're not worthy unless you're perfectly in this ebb and flow. Let me say this. You're fine where you're at, but the goal should be a constant refinement, and it'll all work itself out as long as you keep working at it. Like, you don't have to get it perfect today. And you need to have an honest communication with yourself and get out of some of these new age traps of this over idealizing shitty behavior. I guess is the nicest way that I can put it. So the other aspect of this that comes up is this kind of black color. Black is relative to what I've heard called the Earth Star chakra, and that is what connects you to the ground. And I might be saying that wrong. It's not something I've studied a lot, but black is relative to one of the chakras that keeps you bound to the earth in a healthy way. So sometimes we can become too bound, just as much as we can become too liberated by spirit. You got to kind of interject some of these purples and blues into this strength situation to temper it in a right way. One of the things that we really have to understand is, while we do have some power, which I will rarely say, we do have some power, but most of our power comes from getting out of our own way and allowing the universe, God, whatever you particularly connect with, to help us in our life. So most of the power that we get is blessed or graced upon us through this external source. So we don't have to use a lot of force. It'll handle it for us. And then finally, you have the Six of Bows, which is kind of, I want to say this is called the Spirit Canoe or something like that. So bows is relative to swords in traditional tarot. Swords is relative to thinking or thought, air. So this person is kind of going on this shamanic journey through this city. And again, there's kind of this dirty yellow kind of color going on. Here's the thing. Seeing this dirty yellow and kind of, I guess the other one is more dirty orange now looking at it in strength, which is kind of creating more of the problem tying into that. But the dirty yellow of this all is the biggest part of our journey, at least in my personal experience, the biggest part of our journey is going to come from this distorted sense of self, kind of this dark night of the soul type experience, and that's what's going to send us on this great journey through everything. The ebb and flow aspect of it is understanding that through whatever you're going through right now, difficult, pleasant, there is a blessing and there's a message in it. So this journey of this upcoming week, although it may be unpleasant, you can navigate through it. You don't have to feel less than. You don't have to stay stuck in not being present with your emotions and kind of shrinking up with fear. You don't have to try to really force the change. It's going to come naturally on this ebb and flow. And it's interesting how the last card is the canoe, because ebb and flow is all about water. And the only thing missing from this Six of Bows card is water, because they're floating in the air on this canoe. When you can tap into the cycle of life, bring it into ordinary reality, kind of elevate off the ground from strength into the Six of Bows, you're going to have a better experience. I would say that throughout this week, you're going to be transitioning to a new level of awareness in your life if you're open to the challenges. Because some of you might not be familiar with my tarot reading style, I'm going to explain it this way. I don't view tarot as a fixed state. I've heard destiny talked about, or fate being at the corner of destiny and free will, and that's kind of how I view tarot. These are the most likely occurrences based upon the way that things are now. Because this is a general reading, it could be a little bit more off for some people. The general premise of all of this is to raise awareness to these kind of archetypal experiences so you can make better choices and have more awareness as you go throughout your week if you maintain this in your mind. Ideally, what you would do is listen to this as you go through your week to kind of steer yourself back on course, which is why I would suggest subscribing to the channel. If you would like a more personal reading, again, the link will be in the description below. I just want to say thanks for listening, and have a blessed week, people. Peace.